Good evening. How are you? Well, I'm doing a sit and talk because it was raining and because I was too busy during the day, but I don't remember the rain ever stopping. So I'm here. And there are several things that interest me. One is the Supreme Court decision, which was issued not too long ago, not too long before I started talking to you here. And the Supreme Court, by a 6-3 decision, has decided that Trump may deport Venezuelans to El Salvador. However, there is a requirement that there be due process. They don't say, I don't know if they say it that way, but the exact words, which I do have before me, is detainees must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the Act. The notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. Now, habeas, what they're talking about is let us have the body, habeas corpus. That's how you begin these procedures. And that's what happened in this case. And the judge, therefore, was overruled on his stay of this decision. I think the Supreme Court was wrong there. I have not read it, but I can't imagine that they could reach this result without deciding that the 1798 Act that is involved here, that it satisfied the requirement that there be a war and that the incursion of these people be connected to that war. So there's a whole series of decisions that make that a bad decision. So what is the redeeming virtue? The redeeming virtue is that there's due process in the sense that the right people are going to be taken out of this country absent a war, absent their connection to a war that may or may not belong to a gang. It's a bad decision, and I think it's Roberts trying to wrestle the conservatives to think he's not gone yet by making a decision like this to offset others on the Supreme Court. When in doubt, do what's right. And Roberts has to know what's right, and so this is wrong. And I hope to get a chance to read the opinion tonight or tomorrow morning, and then I may have more to add to it. But I don't think my basic decision is going to change, which is that they had no business treating that act as applicable here in the absence of war with Venezuela. And that to say that a gang is an instrument of a war without any proof of that, objectively independent of these cases, and then secondly, with these cases, they can put no witness on the stand that can satisfy the jurisdictional requirements of this 1798 Act. And it's really annoying to go back to 1798 because this was one of the things that John Adams got wrong. He had the Alien Sedition Acts, and that got transported over time into this act that we still have today, which presumes a state of war, which is one of the reasons why they wanted to have the ability to move people out of the United States. And the Sedition Act part of it was that if they used the wrong words, they could actually be imprisoned. And while John Adams apparently didn't use the removal portion of the acts that he wanted, he did use the sedition provisions, and it was used against the Jeffersonians who supported France genuinely. And John Adams really had no right to a second term having done that. And our present members of the Supreme Court and senators and so forth who support this stuff ignore the fact that this is a lie. If you can't satisfy the act and you're still quoting the act as if it's okay, then you're lying to the people. Now let me talk about a couple of other things that will get your blood running a little bit. We are familiar now with the anti-DEI push. That is, Trump anyhow is against diversion, equity, and inclusion. So if you're against any reference of those things, then what are you for? You are for discrimination. You are for unequal injustice before the law. And you are for excluding people. How else can you read an opposition to DEI? But then there are instances of this that we have to guard against that pull at our heartstrings because of, well, we understand how we got where we are. That this is in a good sense. Discrimination was resisted and overturned in various ways, not cured completely. Discrimination persisted, but we have done great things, and we memorialize that so that people would remember and understand it and affect it in the future. So, the National Park Service, one of my favorites, has portrayals of the Underground Railroad. Gone, erased. Imagine that. This is what Stalin did. This is what Lenin did. This is what great dictators do. We eliminate references to the history, lest you understand them and insist upon them. So what are we talking about? We're talking about we may insist upon diversity and equity and inclusion, but we're really not for that, so we just eliminate those words. Another one that seems brutal somehow, and it's not as if I knew her, but I knew of her. I felt that what she did was amazing. Harriet Tubman. Her picture is gone. Her name is gone. So when you protest, as we shall continue to, as we did the other day, apparently in the millions, we should keep in mind that we are resisting Stalinesque censure, just like we're resisting a Supreme Court decision that defies the facts, contradicts the requirements, and allows a law to exist which by its own terms does not exist. There's a notion about in habeas, let us have the body, okay? So let's approve the body is in prison. Now, let's assume the body in prison is innocent of any criminal act or offense that would put him in prison. What if we also can agree that his custody is mistaken and that he's in stir, in prison, if you will, one of the worst places in the world in El Salvador? Now, Judge Zinnes, who had this case before, said, return him by midnight tonight. And the Supreme Court has said, we'll stay it. It doesn't happen by tonight. And the person who signed that order was Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Another example of misconduct. On the one hand, they're writing about due process. On the other hand, they ignore it when it suits them, it seems. That's wrong. We have the Department of Justice on the same matter said the injunction was unlawful. The injunction of Zinnes was return the man, you have him wrongly, return him back. And in other cases before this administration, it merely took enough to say there's a mistake and they would cure it, but not now, because they don't want to do something they're told to do. This is their resistance to law and order and the Constitution and the statute and the readings. Now, the Fourth Circuit had decided that a stay of the injunction was appropriate, but Roberts issued a stay. Now, I'm not saying these things to cause discomfort. I'm saying these things because some things we have to know, the themes we have to know, so that we see them and we think to defend them. There's a story I like to tell, about Lincoln, and he was always asked what he was doing, and because it was always assumed he was going to do something else, and he said he was preparing for his opportunities. I think of these readings and the studies I do, and that you do, as preparation for the question, what do you do in this situation? That these are two things. They feed the passion to resist and to fight and to rearrange. I think it was H.G. Wells wrote a book, The New Machiavelli, and one of the passages I like was when the protagonist in the story is having an argument with a relative, and he's being told to calm down. And he says, I exist to fight and anger against and search and fight the order as it exists, because my sense of how things are is that there's a better order. And I paraphrased it poorly. I haven't thought of it in a while. But the notion of being ready for an opportunity and of having in mind your character, how you deal with it, and what the circumference of things you can do in that situation realistically. So if you can go to a rally, you do that. If you can give a few bucks, you do that. If you can make a telephone call, you do that. If it's so upsetting to you, you back off and you take pauses as you experience these things. Now, I've always been fond of calling Peter Navarro happy hands. He's always moving his hands. He does things. I don't know where he ever got that habit. It's a tic that's annoying, obnoxious, and maybe fits his flighty self in some way or other. So now we're talking about the tariffs. Navarro is for the tariffs. He's 100% for them. He's saying all sorts of lying things about what they mean, but it's kind of interesting to watch the children play, because he's opposing Musk, who thinks that we should zero out the tariffs. And that's pretty interesting. I mean, it serves his personal views, but let's face it, if we're going to get Republicans to do anything, they're going to have their ox gored in such a fashion as that they may be fighting for us, but they're really fighting for themselves, for the wealthy. So we should look back. We've talked about tariffs in the past, and it's kind of interesting to look at the tariffs in 1930, because the game and the rule doesn't change. And tariffs went up around the world. We did ours, they did theirs, they went up. And the world in 1930, the world exports were 1/3 of what they had been in 1929. And so that is a substantial statement about the damage that a tariff can do. Now, you could argue that free trade provides economic benefits to all simultaneously. And there's a lot of truth in that. The notion of comparative advantage, if you will, is to look at what you have you can sell as compared to what they can sell, and that the difference between the two becomes an economic value to both. Let me give you a different example. We put tariffs on sugar, and this is a study from the 1930 period. We put a tariff on sugar, and then the people here at home, they're having some success because they can sell sugar now. But the sugar that they sell at the higher price is compromising those who make cakes and so forth. This is not imaginary, this is true. And so when you mess with a multidimensional system, the law of unintended consequences or selfishness to only protect sugar industry at the expense of others is your objective. Now, comparative advantage is an economy's manner of balancing particular goods and services. So when we look around the world, if everybody has tariffs, we have not only killed free trade, we have compromised sensible trade. David Ricardo is the fellow who long ago came up with the notion of comparative advantage between countries. And there are all sorts of charts and things that you can look at on this. Another person, also from Harvard, Michael Porter, had a different approach, competitive advantage, which is domestically we look at what do we have? At the very least, you take a cost, you take a differential. I can charge more for something in which I have a specialty or a differential that somebody else doesn't have. That would be a way of competing, say, domestically between two different businesses. And we have an example, which is that Russia was behind the production of Elon Musk's cars, but the Chinese industry learned from Elon, and they exceeded by $100 million. Well, they succeeded breaking through $100 million for their electric cars, leaving in the dust Elon Musk. Now, they found the competitive advantage. Will they get a chance for that comparative advantage to benefit us? Not when we're putting higher tariffs on China, which is apparently what I read we're doing today. So is there a synthesis to my bobbing and weaving here? Yes, I think there is. It goes like this. Every day we're going to have events and chapters that are disheartening and others that are encouraging. We can't allow this to pull us apart rather. So we have to, interesting slip, I think we should hold ourselves together. And my theory of this, it's kind of I've said it before, so I forgive me for repeating it, but I sort of mentally look for the light. That is to say, an opening, a passageway that seems to have promise, and I try to devote myself to that. So in a small way, I go to a rally and I'm part of a panel, or I do what I'm doing with you guys right now. And I contribute something to the ACLU, and if I get an opportunity, I do something more. And that comes from looking for the asymmetric possibilities and the symmetric possibilities. Symmetric, they say X, I say not X, direct contradiction. The bad guys are over here, and we can move over here because there's nothing interfering with us. So we look for these opportunities politically, intelligently, and we allow ourselves to find spaces to guard against these disappointments weighing against the opportunities we have to move forward. The prize is worth it. The prize is freedom. You can call it voting, that's a freedom. You can call it equal justice before the law. That's a prize. Especially when people want to discriminate against you because your skin is a certain color, or you came from a different place, or you think a different way, or you have a religion, or you dress strange, or they don't like your accent, any number of things. These are the things that are not acceptable. Because people who are diverse and different and find courage, they create an underground railroad. They find a way to trade with other nations that don't hurt everybody in view. They find a way to treat people fairly when they're punishing them, if that's what they think they can do, by having hearings to see that it's fair or not. These are the elements of a republic that has a vibrant franchise and that feels it's all in this together, rather than to have a person who is this deep, vacuous creature who knows only to strike out and hurt. His relative said that, as a kid, somebody put potatoes in his hair, mashed potatoes in his hair, and he was so humiliated, he hated it, and it affected it in such a way. Well, there are some things, yes, that are heinous, but that should have been a laugh, and a person that had something in here would just sort of get a kick out of it. In other words, this guy is not like other people that we aspire to have lead us or be with us, or to be a moment in our life that is enlivening to who we are and what we do and what we may do. A person that releases us to the opportunities that freedom can give us. So anyhow, that's what I have to say today. And maybe tomorrow I'll be able to walk outside. Bye-bye.